think it's been over a year since I've done one of these. Last time I remember, they would always count down before they started. Now they just say preparing, start. I was just doing a meditation practice that I hadn't done for a while that is focused on tuning into a quality called equanimity, which one of the teachers described as the quality of okayness, which can be a very subtle quality that is often not esteemed. And in doing this practice this evening, I found awareness moving through this body and finding all sorts of ways, all sorts of pain, much manifesting as physical pain, but being rooted in some kind of past event or awareness, relationship. Which is really the wonderful part of meditation, that you can apply something very simple, and it's a fractal, so you touch anything and you're like, oh, there's a little pain in my shoulder, and it can unpack, spiraling back into a whole bunch of occurrences, and how it's affecting you right now, which is one of my philosophies of why I do massage. Oh, very quiet. I'm speaking very quietly. Should I get closer to the... Let me see. Is this better? Can you hear me? Halloween Eve. Jeff is in a place where there's people who, at least my relationship with the people and the community that he lives, does this thing to me where I'm like, it's Halloween, but that's like the Hallmark version of Samhain. It's not really happening right now. Actual Samhain is happening at 15 degrees Scorpio, or the new moon, which is in a few days. So tonight's just a celebration for the muggles or the plebes. Not to be judgy, not necessary. However, if we're playing with the old reason for the season, it's not tonight. Tonight's just an arbitrary calendar day in which people eat a lot of sugar and dress up as cultural heroes or memes. I went to sleep at sunset and woke up 3 hours later. Yeah, I just don't think I was projecting, because I hadn't spoken for many hours, and I wasn't, I was probably talking inside of myself more than talking out to the device. So I'll repeat. I was doing a meditation that I hadn't done for quite a while, that's based in a practice called the brahmaviharas, which I have done other videos about. And I met a pair of brothers in Indiana recently that are estranged, and both of them talked about watching my videos, and both of them talked about sharing my videos with their mother, which I thought, wow, that's an interesting flexus. And one of them mentioned this video. He's like, I shared this video with her where you were just like talking on the beach. And I said, well, there are many of those. Which one was it? And he said, and he sent it to me, and it was, let's talk about the brahmaviharas. So tonight I was practicing a brahmavihara that is often translated as equanimity, which is the awareness of the quality of okayness, which is a very subtle quality that is often not esteemed or valued because it feels perhaps a bit bland. It's certainly not exciting. And when thinking about, let's say, this evening or any evening that people feel is a holiday, or that people feel, let's say, any Friday night for the average working person feels like a night where you're free, you don't have to work the next day, you have an opportunity to do something special that you can't do most days. And with that comes almost a responsibility to make it good. And that good often means something that is, I don't know, like a party, something that's high, right? We often think that what is good is high. It's exciting. With high and exciting comes a few qualities that are not good, like friction, exhaustion, and the eventual letdown after the high, because one cannot live in a constant state of high. And it is this very simple quality of mind that often leads people in what extreme cases is called like bipolar disorder, but the constant wave of, oh, this is great, and then being like, oh, just the, what am I doing, kind of apathy. Right? So equanimity is this quality of balance that is not high in any way, but it's not bad in any way. It's a quality of acceptance, and the simplest way of experiencing it is tuning into any of your experiences that you're having right now, which could be the sense of smell, or the sense of sound, or any sensation in your body, which is where I often go because I am a very body-oriented person. And whatever one notices, so just take a moment now and notice what the smells smell like. Take a moment now and notice what the sounds sound like. Take a notice and feel what the body feels like. Whatever comes to your awareness, say, can I be okay with that? When practicing something like this, you start with anything you can be okay with. Anything that you find I can't be okay with, you just kind of move along from. This practice is not forcing your nose into something unpleasant. But anything you can be okay with, you explore what that sensation feels like. And this is where it becomes interesting, because understanding the taste, flavor, texture, landscape of balance and okayness, and in fact the freedom and expansiveness of being okay. Noticing what that actually feels like allows all of these other sensations that you are not okay with to come up like peaks and valleys in the landscape. And that's where it becomes a practice. If you set a alarm for a half hour or an hour and you just explore, can I be okay with this? And let whatever happen come up into your consciousness, the sounds, the smells, memories, thoughts. For me, it's so much feelings in the body, which is actually what's getting to the topic of what I called this live stream. which is the awareness of psychic pollution for health. When setting a timer and doing this practice, and exploring the landscape of, can I be okay with this? Watching what comes up in that field of, this is not okay in my psyche. And again, we carry so many things throughout our lives that we are not okay with. And let's say it happened to us 7 months ago and we really weren't okay with it when it happened, and it's just there on the landscape. It's like a house in a field or a tree that grew up. It's not a bad tree. It's not a bad house. It just hurts. Like, it's just painful or scary or overwhelming or depressing or something. Like, it's really hard to be okay with it. And it just lodges in the body. As a masseur, this is what I do with my hands. My consciousness, I go through people's bodies and I feel things, and they're like, oh, you found a spot there. And I'm like, this is just something that's happened in your life that you could not be okay with. That, I mean, this is, again, just a simple translation of life experience. Could not be okay with. And it's just there. It's just hanging out in your body or in your psyche, in your consciousness somewhere. It is very important to explore this terrain from time to time, finding an anchor, a fulcrum, where you can balance and feel just okay. Not great and not bad, but just like relaxed and okay, like everything is okay. From that place, being able to describe, have the emotional awareness of the topography of the highs and the lows, of the good and the bad. It's a useful practice to touch some of those things that you couldn't be okay with at some point, and see if you could be okay with it now. I feel a pain in my heart. Can I be okay with this? If the answer is no, what is really useful to do is say, okay, can I be okay with not being okay with this right now? You keep asking that question down the chain. If the answer is no, you're like, okay, what else is happening? Okay, I'm hearing something. Can I be okay with that? Okay. And what you'll find is, like the pain in your heart that you couldn't be okay with, it's still there. It's still there. But you found something else you could be okay with. And so it's constantly touching this kind of rebalancing. Like, okay, I can balance. It's like safe to put my foot on this rock, but it's not safe to put my foot on this rock. So that rock's still there, but this rock I can stand on. It's okay. It's okay. And eventually, as you find enough rocks or enough pieces of wood or whatever metaphor you want to use that you can stand on that feels solid and balanced and grounded, then generally the places that earlier you couldn't be okay with, then you can be okay with. And if you extrapolate this into a practice of a lifetime, eventually you can find a way to be okay with everything. And again, expanding on the metaphor, you can build scaffolding of safety to be able to encompass anything that you couldn't be okay with. This is a practice I've been doing for years now, so I would say that I have this kind of relationship with it. All getting to that pain in my heart. And what I often find such a difficult part of relationship, that at various points in our lives we really value something that hurts us. Be it something like, we'll make it very prescient for tonight, like, I should go out and have a party. I should have fun. And what does that mean? I should dress up, and maybe I should do some drugs. Those drugs might just be alcohol or pot, things that are not considered bad drugs nowadays, but I should go out and get high. I should go out and have fun. I should have a party. I should make tonight special. And when we value these kind of things with the logical weight that leads us to thinking those are a good idea, meaning like, why do I think, as I referenced earlier, if we work a regular work week, Friday night becomes this is a night that I should go out and do something. Holidays become a day when you have an expectation of it should be a good time. And if you move into that space when you don't actually feel good, when your body is exhausted, and let's say your heart is weary, that you're not resourced with love and care or enough sleep. Friday night's such a great example because most people are totally exhausted by the time they get there, and then they give themselves this expectation. Holidays are a great example, especially the winter holidays, because it's the time of the year when everybody should kind of be hibernating like bears. If they live in cold places, they should be quiet and resting. And they force themselves into this manic spiral of shopping and eating huge amounts of food and socializing, when really what their psyche and their body would be to just be quiet for a while. just be still. Their body would really like to just be still, and yet the emotional, social expectation is to have a good time, and that you're somehow wasting your life if you don't force yourself to go out and have a good time, or even just stay up watching TV and have a good time, because so much of your time is devoted to supporting your life, to this moment, to this Friday night, to this Halloween, to this Christmas, whatever, to this holiday. And these kind of expectations and actions that stem from them can drag us into very imbalanced states of being not okay. Pushing ourselves into a high, and then being so exhausted and depleted and unresourced that we get bitter, or we have a dramatic explosion, we cry. I come from a family that has a lot of, I've seen this so often in family gatherings, that like, we're supposed to have a good time, let's just have a good time, let's drink a lot of alcohol, and then a few hours later there's crying and screaming, and it's like clockwork. I'm listening to some David Sedaris, his diaries right now, Theft by Finding, and his little voice and his stories and his family, and it's so useful to hear stories of other people's families. So you're just like, oh yeah, the dysfunction of my family is nothing unique. It is just humans, and the relationship we have with our family is that we love them in a way we don't love anyone else. And obviously when we choose our families and build our friend networks, they become our families, then we love them in a way we don't love anyone. Yes, David is great. And the permissions we give our family, we might not give anyone else. If some random person came up to you and started screaming at you and crying or doing some very inappropriate thing, you would just be like, what the fuck is this crazy person? You wouldn't give them any time or space, and you just walk away from them or put them in jail, whatever. But with our family members and or very close friends that we have long relationships with, we tolerate a whole bunch of torture. Which is kind of what I was trying to describe earlier. There's a concept that I was introduced to in the 90s when I was smoking a lot of pot and listening to a lot of music. There was a musician from England called Tricky who smoked a lot of pot and made a lot of music. And one of his songs, there was a term, a coupling of words that he said, psychic pollution. I think the line was something like, see me in psychic pollution. And my mind really hung on that. And at the time, I didn't really believe in psychics. And I don't think at the time maybe I just started meditation. But I was aware of a potential from all the experiences I had had with people and the way that I naturally work as a being in this manifestation, that I can't say that I'm a mind reader, and I can't say that I'm a psychic in the way that I've met people who purport to have those qualities, if you don't believe in those things, or people that I've perceived to have those qualities. But I was aware that I was able to be affected by other people's thoughts and feelings in a way that wasn't directly logical, and I was able to affect people with my thoughts and feelings without necessarily trying to. That by putting my physical being into relations with other people at a party or in a bar or in a love relationship or a family gathering, the equation was changed. The emotional soup was a different recipe, and all of the people were changed by the different couplings of people. To describe this in a way, I was walking down the street last night and saw some graffiti that said, yes, empathy. Yes, empathy. I'll use that metaphor in a moment. This graffiti said, spirituality and reality. You live in both all the time. A conversation I often have with people is, because I hear often people will come to me and say like, oh, you're spiritually connected. I like that you're spiritually connected. My husband isn't spiritually connected. And I'll say something like, when you are spiritually connected, which really can mean a whole large, kind of infinite realm of awareness, then spirituality is real to you. And I often think of it as a dimension outside of, between, around the physical realm that is very real, but you can't touch it or measure it, which, it's why it's got that funny reality of spirituality, the itty at the end there. But it's not anything you can touch. You can't necessarily hear it, but you perceive it. If you have a spiritual connection, you can perceive spirituality. It is a real, words so useless. It is a existing thing. It is an existing place. It is an existing quality that can be known to people who are connected to it. But because it is not in the physical world, it cannot be known to people who are not connected to it and are only in the physical world. These people are not better or worse than people who are connected to spiritual realms. But a physical realm is very localized. If you believe in reality, the reality of your reality is the room you are in and the moment you are in, and the room outside of your room is just a concept. Outside of this apartment is an idea, because I'm not there. I'm right here in this apartment. Wherever you are right now is where you are right now, and nothing else is real on that real level. Watching the news is a conundrum for people who are material empiricists. Some people call themselves atheists or whatever. People who only believe in the physical reality, don't believe in spirituality, because they might believe in the news about all these things that are happening, all these places that really at that moment are only a myth because they're in a very specific localized place. Spirituality, can be described in a whole bunch of ways that religion has tried to codify. Spiritualities have tried to codify. If you talk about chakra, when I teach things, when you talk about chakras, are chakras real? No, they're spiritual. But do they really exist? Yes, if you use them, or if somebody else believes them and uses them around you. You have chakras in you, regardless of if you believe them or not, because other people do believe them. Therefore, they become a spiritual language, which makes them a spiritual reality. They exist in spirituality. And this is a chicken or egg conversation, like when people talk about God. Did God create humans, or did humans create God? Well, who believed in who first? Perhaps the relationship is mutually dependent, that God only exists with people who believe in him, and thus only people can exist that were created by God because they believe in him. It doesn't matter. Talking about these kind of things is recursive. It goes on, it spirals. But that generates a lot of energy, obviously. So the point that I'm making here is that in me coming to awareness of this term, psychic pollution, and being aware that my presence around other people affected them, that putting my physical presence with other people was physically changing how they were living in the moment. And again, when I was doing drugs, marijuana or acid, I would be aware of how much what was going on inside of my mind was affecting the people I was with, even though I wasn't necessarily putting it into action or words. And I was noticing that it was just as possible that me being around these people was making this stuff happen inside of my head. That there was a communication happening that wasn't dependent on external connection. Meaning if you were in the room with me and I was looking in your eyes and speaking to you, I would be taking this energy from inside of me, putting it into words, and putting it in your ears, right? I would be looking in your eyes, and let's say there would be an energy, I would be streaming from my eyes to your eyes. This is just regular human communication. But that's a reality version of communication, putting things into conceptual packages we call words, spitting them out, receiving them, and seeing all the human cues of the facial expressions, and I guess you could say the pheromones, and there's physical, empirical things that can be marked. However, I also believe that if I'm speaking to you right now, there are undulating wave fields of energy that could be called chakras or auras or things that don't need conceptual frameworks that are flowing from me to you. And not even so much in a directional vector kind of way, but the being of us together. And I actually believe this happens even if you're not in the same space. You can be video chatting with someone or text typing with someone and feel a connection with them. That the being in communion, the being in communication builds a bridge in a spiritual realm between you and another person. There's a connection right there, and things flow back and forth, and the shape of them changes because of that connection. This is a friendship, this is a relationship, this is a family dynamic. When our emotional landscape, as I was describing earlier, has a whole bunch of peaks and valleys, objects in the field that we cannot be okay with. Let's say we've never valued making the field clear. Why would we value making the field clear? Well, it gives you freedom. It also is boring because it's a flat plane. It's an empty field. But sometimes boring and okayness is much better than bipolar, manic depressive, emotional breakdown kind of I'm having a good time. Why can't I have a good time? Valuing having great time that leads you into depressive whirlpools, like maybe sometimes a flat, empty landscape of total freedom is healthier or more relaxing or more pleasant than the constant up and down. So when interacting with another person, if we have a whole bunch of clutter in our emotional terrain, they're being affected by that. And this is so normal that it's not something often thought about. But if we notice repeatedly the sadness and dissatisfaction, the frustration of not being happy all the time when we expect to be happy, or not getting what we deserve from the effort we put into life, that itself can keep us from experiencing the joy and peace available to us in every moment. And that we can chase this feeling of high goodness. I should be having a good time. When again, really what we would benefit most from is freedom, quiet, and peace. I say from a room in New York City. And when we don't value balance and okayness, and we don't notice the endless chasing of happiness that leads to misery, we create a type of psychic pollution. This is just one way to do so. Any kind of pain we carry in us all the time, when we become intimate with another person, is shared. The majority of us people have a tremendous amount of trauma and commitments to hatred, fear, a huge amount of stress and pain that we live with and carry. And it doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to carry so much misery. We don't have to generate so much misery. And in our relationships and in our place in society, we don't need to broadcast and share so much misery. I'm staying in a friend's apartment who's an artist who was very traumatized when he was a child growing up in Germany. And his artwork is beautiful. Features images of his dad shooting himself, and people shooting each other, and people raping each other, and people beating each other up, and bleeding horses, and shot by drunk people with guns. Memories from his childhood. He makes beautiful images from his trauma. And I suppose what we have been given in our lives is what we have to work with. But being aware of what we're bringing to the soup is quite a gift when we consider what we are asking other people to take on, to resonate with. I love many people. I love loving people. I love giving people love in the in physical forms: hugging, massage, sex, pleasure, presence, listening. But sometimes when I connect with somebody just to share time with them, I love you, I just want to connect. Sometimes that's a phone call, sometimes that's sitting with them, person. People tend to like to vent. You know that term, venting. Oh, I'm just venting. It is often heartbreaking to me that the way that we spend time with each other is vomiting our trauma at each other as the only thing we value to share with one another. And again, looking at it from a meditation practice, our emotional terrain is so filled with stuff we cannot be okay with, that when we are in presence with someone that we love and we open up to them, we have to, it's just what's in the room. Yeah, it's just what's in the room. We have to just open up our heart and just be like, you're beautiful, I love you. This guy said this horrible thing to me and it hurt me really badly. An hour of blah, 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 blah. You know, like we want to just be in the, you're beautiful, I love you, I'm so grateful to be with you, it's so nice to see you again. I hate that you did this thing 20 years ago, or that our sister did, or that my dad did, or that this constant state of it's just the nature of humanity, but it doesn't have to be that way. The simplicity, and I don't do this all the time as much as I should, so I don't expect anyone else to, but just knowing that we have technology, skills, and time when we are not in a constant state of hunter-gatherer, like fight or flight, life during wartime life, we have the opportunity to brush our teeth, to wash the dishes, to take a shower, to do our laundry. We have the opportunity to do all these things, to pick up the stuff in the room, to organize the papers and put stuff in recycling. And we also have the time to meditate, or whatever you want to call it, to sort through our emotional landscape and look at the objects around and be like, can I be okay with that? Oh, look, there's a gigantic refrigerator there. I guess I left that there after Hurricane Katrina. Is it filled with rotten food and maggots? How do I decontaminate this bomb? I have this whole childhood thing in a box here. Can I be okay with that? Maybe one piece at a time. Oh, I can't be okay with that. Let me go over here and be with the flowers. Can I be okay with that? That's good. Hummingbirds are nice. I like cats. What's this over here again? Finding our ways to sort through that bitch who said something to me yesterday at work, the guy who cut me off, and let that go so that we don't have to bring it in our hearts. This thing that he did to me 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that I'll never forgive him for, and therefore carrying hatred in our hearts and sharing that with those we love. It is so continually heartbreaking to me that I connect with people with love and appreciation and have to feel the hatred, the insanity, the fear. And I spend most of my life being that same way, so I know how hard it is to live with these things. I didn't add up the amount of money I spent on going to meditation retreats and whatever like practices, the trainings. I don't know, Taoist trainings, Buddhist trainings, yoga trainings. I don't know. But I don't have a college degree. But I feel like I went to a technical school. Chuck is a diesel mechanic and a darn good one. one of my child memories about a technical school in Indiana. I'm not a diesel mechanic, but I have perhaps articulate awareness of a spiritual reality that might just be called the emotional field. I don't know. I think there's multiple levels that one can be aware of. Breathe, exhale. Hi, Michael Carey, I love you. Let's do yoga putts. Being able to know how to release the frictions of frustrations, be it through meditation or yoga or enjoying art, or I mean, even if this works for you, smoking a cigar and drinking a glass of wine and letting it melt out of you into a beautiful vista. I don't think watching TV until you fall asleep does the same thing, though. I don't think entertaining the mind with a static field of noise is the same thing. I definitely know people who that's their version of relaxing, and I touch their bodies and they are not relaxed, so it's not actually relaxing. And I suppose what led me to make this video tonight was wanting to share this articulation, but realize at the end of this talk that is it an entreaty? It's an entreaty like to everyone I know. I love us, let's brush our teeth together. I love us, let's clean up the emotional landscape, so that when we're together we don't need to vomit our traumas onto each other. I love us, let us value okayness sometimes, that it doesn't have to be such a high and it doesn't have to be such a low. And that in that kind of balance and peace, we can clear spaces to be together without being at war or in an ocean filled with plastic and, chemical spills. It's just one of those gentle, heart entreaties, I love you, let's be at peace together. And always translating it, how do you translate that out of religion? Is this everything I do? Am I this kind of this person who's a priest who doesn't want to be in church, who is a priest who doesn't want to be in a religion? Who's just hey, this is a physical tool. I went to a trade school. I learned this skill of being able to sort through emotional stuff. Try it out sometime. I just think of the time I've spent with my family and the lovers I've been with over the last few weeks being here in the city. It's so nice to see all these different people. And I guess even the few people I was seeing right before I left Indianapolis that weren't my family. And just the amount of trauma and pain and misery that in some of the people, they were just oh, it's this one guy who was just yeah, it's just my husband has Alzheimer's and he's losing touch with the present, but we're going to Palm Springs and we're going to have a good time. And I was just wow, totally at peace with that. Not in a state of misery about it. We can still have a good time together. Okay, great. Versus someone who had a nice connection with me and then got really drunk and started texting me cruel things. Because when he was alone, he found a place that he couldn't be okay with and then decided to share that misery with me. Just knowing that that's not necessary, Being aware of the psychic pollution that we live in. Being aware of the psychic pollution that we generate and share. And taking it upon ourselves to neutralize the toxin to the best of our ability, so that when we enter the soup of relationship, of interacting with other people, we're not poisoning them. And being less toxified ourselves, have the ability to take on, to let other people's toxicities float through. We can't expect people to not have suffering, to not have psychic pollution and anger and frustration and patience and jealousy. But like a cat who catches a mouse and brings it to you and is like, aren't you happy I brought this to you? And you're like, that is actually not useful to me. When a friend that I love, tells me how much he hates his neighbors and wants to destroy their business with like vengeance and hatred and is joyful about this, I'm like, that's not useful to me. It doesn't actually make me feel good that you are feeling that way. Having the ability to value peace and knock the sandcastles down that are about stress and tension. I'm going to be in New York City for another month. I'm trying to imagine how I want to do that. Like if I want to get out of the city every week and go somewhere else. Or rent a little apartment near the beach in the Rockaways. I've never been out there. Or I've never stayed out there, Well, I'll go back to Mexico with whatever struggles happen there. But the sound of the ocean. Holding space. Holding space in New York City. Getting physical therapy for my shoulder. Going through experiences. Thankful for what we got. It's just a moment. I hope you've had a lovely evening, whatever it is you've done. And notice in the next few days, when the moon is new, the spirits that come around, you don't have to be afraid of them. Have a Samhain. Maybe you can see or hear or feel the emotional realms, the spiritual realms, clearer. It's what the ancients said, we did it. That's what tonight is supposed to be celebrating. The clarity in the darkness. Happy Scorpio. Happy Samhain. And all of the infinite meanings that those silly words and concepts are meant to convey. Love you, Bob. Love you, Lane. Love you, Jeff. Love you, Mike.